the teacher who changed a life with just 2 words. In the early 1970s, a boy named Mark Eklund was a junior high student in a small town in Minnesota. Mark was known for being friendly, well-behaved, and always smiling, but he struggled in school. He was especially frustrated in English class. Grammar, spelling, and writing weren't his strengths. His teacher, Sister Helen Rosla, saw how discouraged he was. One day, instead of handing out another test, she tried something different. She gave every student a piece of paper with their classmates' names listed and said, "Write down the nicest thing you can say about each person in this class." The students looked confused, but they did it. She collected the papers, compiled the kind words for each student, and handed the lists out the next day. Mark's face lit up when he read what his classmates had written about him. He never forgot it. Years later, Sister Helen lost touch with many of her students after they graduated. But years later, she received a call from Mark's parents. Mark had died in the Vietnam War. At his funeral, his parents approached her and said, "We want to show you something." They handed her a worn piece of paper, folded, taped, and yellow with age. It was that list she had made years ago, the one filled with kind words from his classmates. Mark had kept it with him all those years, even through war. And then something even more unexpected happened. One by one, other former students who attended the funeral said, "I still have mine too." In their wallets, drawers, and memory boxes, those simple sheets of paper had survived decades, carried by people who never forgot how it felt to be told they mattered. The lesson: a teacher's small idea, meant to lift her students for a day, lifted them for life. Words matter. Kindness lasts. And sometimes, what seems like a small gesture can become someone's most precious treasure. The girl who hid the resistance. Henny Shaft, the girl with the red hair. In Nazi-occupied Netherlands during World War II, a young university student named Henny Shaft gave up her chance at a quiet life to become one of the most feared members of the Dutch resistance. She was just a teenager when the Germans invaded her country in 1940. Like many Dutch citizens, she was horrified by what she saw happening: Jews being rounded up, dissenters silenced, and ordinary families living in fear. While most people kept their heads down to survive, Henny made a choice that would change her life forever. She decided to fight back, becoming a resistance fighter. At first, Henny helped in small ways. She hid Jewish children, forged identification papers, and passed along secret messages. But it wasn't long before she joined a resistance cell that specialized in sabotage, espionage, and targeted assassinations of high-ranking Nazis and collaborators. She dyed her hair red and became known as the girl with the red hair. She would ride her bike past checkpoints and through occupied cities, delivering secret documents, guns, and food to hidden Jewish families. She also helped plan and carry out attacks on Nazi targets, often hiding weapons under her coat or in a basket of bread. A wanted woman. As her missions became bolder, the Nazis placed her on their most wanted list. They knew her only as a mysterious red-haired girl who kept slipping through their fingers. Even after many of her resistance partners were captured or killed, Henny refused to stop. She once said, "I am not afraid. I fight because I hate injustice." In March 1945, just weeks before the war ended, Henny was captured. She was tortured, but she refused to give up any names. The Nazis, knowing the war was nearly lost, executed her by firing squad. She was just 24 years old. What she left behind. After the war, Henny Shaft became a symbol of courage in the Netherlands. Schools were named after her. Streets bear her name. And every year on the day of her death, Dutch citizens lay flowers on her grave. And Frank wrote about the kind of heroism Henny embodied, saying, "How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world." Henny didn't wait. The message: not every hero wore a uniform. Some wore a student's coat, rode a bicycle, and refused to look away when evil rose around them. Henny Shaft reminds us that resistance can be quiet, clever, and relentless, and that even one brave young woman can shake the foundations of an empire. Act 1. The Diplomat in Lithuania. In 1939, as war clouds gathered over Europe, Shun Sugihara, a quiet, well-educated Japanese diplomat, was posted to the small city of Kaunas, Lithuania. His mission was to gather intelligence on Nazi and Soviet troop movements, but soon, his purpose would change entirely. In the summer of 1940, the Nazis had conquered much of Europe. Poland had already fallen. Jews who had fled to Lithuania were trapped, desperate to escape before the Nazis expanded further. But they needed visas, exit papers, even transit visas to escape. One morning in July, Sugihara awoke to find hundreds of Jewish refugees standing outside the gates of the Japanese consulate, clutching their documents, begging for help. The problem? Tokyo had issued strict rules. No visas without a long list of requirements, including money, valid destinations, and political clearance. Sugihara was faced with a choice: obey his government or listen to his conscience. Act 2. The decision to disobey. Shun Sugihara cabled Tokyo 3 times, asking permission to issue visas to the refugees. 3 times, he was denied. So he made a decision that would change and endanger his life. I may have to disobey my government, he told his wife Yukiko. But if I don't, I will be disobeying God. Sugihara began writing visas by hand. He and his wife worked 16 to 20 hours a day, handwriting travel documents for desperate families, many of whom had nothing but hope. Each visa took several minutes to complete. He issued them in batches of 100, then 300, then 600. Some families waited for days. He came out to the gate to speak to them, sometimes giving them food, even comforting crying children. When the consulate was shut down by the Soviets in late August 1940, Sugihara had to leave. As he boarded the train out of Kaunas, he was still writing visas on the platform, handing them through the train window. His last act, before the train pulled away, was to throw a stack of signed, blank visas out of the window into the hands of the crowd. Act 3. The cost of courage. In total, Sugihara issued over 2,000 visas, which helped around 6,000 Jews escape. Many fled via the Trans-Siberian Railway to Japan, then on to Shanghai or other safe havens. Back in Japan, Sugihara was not honored. He was dismissed from the foreign ministry in 1947. His family struggled to survive. He took odd jobs. For decades, his story was forgotten. Even his children didn't know what he had done. But the people he saved did not forget. They called themselves Sugihara survivors. Many moved to Israel, the U.S., Canada, and South America. Some became doctors, teachers, scientists, and even rabbis. One man who received a Sugihara visa went on to become the grandfather of the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv. Act 4. Recognition. Too late. It wasn't until the 1980s that researchers began uncovering Sugihara's story. Survivors tracked him down and nominated him for honors. In 1985, Israel named him Righteous Among the Nations, a title given to non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jews during the Holocaust. Shun Sugihara was frail and ill, but he lived to receive this honor. His grave in Japan now reads simply, Humanity and Justice. Today, schools, parks, and museums are named after him. In Israel, over 40,000 descendants of the people he saved are alive today, all thanks to the man who chose to write visas instead of walk away. Candle legacy. When asked why he did it, Sugihara said, they were human beings, and they needed help. I'm glad I found the strength to make the decision to do what I did. He never called himself a hero, but history remembers him as one of the greatest moral figures of World War II, a man who chose compassion over compliance and life over silence. Part 1. The Wall Goes Up. In 1939, Germany invaded Poland. By October 1940, the Nazis forced over 400,000 Jews into a small, walled section of Warsaw, Poland's capital. This was the Warsaw Ghetto, the largest Jewish ghetto in Nazi-occupied Europe. Overcrowded, starving, and filled with disease, the ghetto became a place of slow death. The Nazis sent thousands to Treblinka, a death camp, telling people they were being resettled for work. Most were murdered within hours of arrival. By 1942, only about 60,000 Jews remained. And something changed. People stopped believing the lies, and they began to resist. Part 2. The resistance forms. Led mostly by young people, 2 underground groups formed. The Jewish Combat Organization, OB, and the Jewish Military Union, ZW. They were poorly armed, pistols, homemade grenades, and a few stolen rifles, but they were determined. They smuggled weapons through sewers, bribed German soldiers, and even made alliances with non-Jewish Polish resistance fighters. Their goal was not to win. They knew that was impossible, but to die fighting. With dignity, instead of being led silently to slaughter. Part 3. The uprising begins. April 19, 1943. On the eve of Passover, German forces entered the ghetto with tanks and flamethrowers to begin the final liquidation. But this time, they were met with gunfire. Jewish fighters attacked from rooftops, alleyways, and bunkers. They ambushed soldiers, threw Molotov cocktails, and disappeared into the ruins. The Nazis were stunned. It was the first time Jews had organized an armed uprising in a city. For weeks, they fought back. They used the sewers to escape. They burned German supply wagons. Some even captured weapons from the enemy. One fighter, Marek Edelman, later said, "We were fighting for 3 lines in history." Part 4. The end, but not the defeat. After nearly a month, the Germans systematically destroyed the ghetto, burning buildings, bombing hideouts, and flooding the sewer tunnels. On May 16, 1943, the Nazis blew up the Great Synagogue of Warsaw as a symbolic end to Jewish resistance. Most fighters were killed or captured. The ghetto was in ruins. But the story didn't die there. Part 5. The legacy. Though militarily crushed, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising became a symbol of defiance and bravery. It inspired other revolts in camps like Treblinka and Sobibor. Survivors of the uprising joined the wider Polish resistance or fled to fight elsewhere. In post-war years, the world would learn of what happened, not from Nazi records, but from the testimonies and diaries of those who lived and died in the ghetto. One of the last commanders, Marek Edelman, survived the war and became a cardiologist. He never called himself a hero. He said the real heroes were the people who simply chose to resist in the face of certain death.